back for a second. I don't know why I need to do that.
It's karate chopping, right?
It was back with Jaime Woo. um, and I wanna ask you about this book that you're putting together, and I want to know what stage you're at, and you're definitely sort of, if I'm correct, you're taking advantage of sort of like the crowdsourcing platform to let people know that you want to do this, and if with building enough interest, you're committed to kind of keep going. So tell us a little bit about your book project.
Yeah, and so this audience is it a writing audience or is it a general audience?
My audience?
Yeah, your audience.
My audience is anybody who knows and likes me, and then probably a fair like readers. But there's definitely some techie, gamey people in there as well.
But some inside baseball would also be interesting, right? About why I did the way that I. Okay.
Yeah.
You can cut me out wherever you want.
No, I'm including that because you use the term inside baseball.
Yeah. Well, so basically, I did, so my project's called Gaming Grindr. It is a look at Grindr, which is a gay sex cruising app on smartphones and on I think tablet devices as well, where you can use this app to find other men who have this service, and because of GPS, it'll be able to tell you how close these men are, and it orders them on your screen based on proximity. It started 3 years ago. They've got 4 million users. I thought it was so fascinating.
Yeah.
No one had written any books about it yet. I really wanted to look at, because a lot of the work that I do looks at how technology affects our lives. Mm-hmm. I was curious how having a digital gay sex cruising app affects our lives. And then there was something that kind of made me really connect the game part, is that we often describe sex using play and game terms. Hey, score with that person. Oh man, if you have sex with too many people, you're such a player. Gay men will tell each other that they're interested in play, and when they use that terminology, they're talking about usually strings-free sex. And so it was really fascinating to me that for sex we've co-opted so much language from play and from games. And I wanted to see whether or not there was a strategy to Grindr, because games are really just systems, and they can be very complex systems, which I think why kind of technically minded people sometimes tend to go towards games. I think sometimes if you love seeing how a system works, that's why you might go towards games. And so Grindr is that way for me, because I was like, this is obviously a system. What strategies do we use that we feel the most value out of using it? I know so many friends who are so disappointed or disenchanted with it or jaded, and I think it's in part because they didn't understand what the system of Grindr was. They're looking for true love on Grindr. I not that true love through cruising. I just think that for an app that only provides you one screenshot for your profile and a brief description, and then your height and weight, that's never really the best parameters to find love. Just saying. It's not happen, and if other people aren't looking for true love, then even if you found someone who you were going to be super compatible with, but you're not looking at the same thing at the same time, it makes those odds a lot less.
Right.
So I did. I didn't want to go through a traditional publisher because Amazon had just, they had their Kindle releases. Mm-hmm. I knew that this would be much more well received as a digital release than a book. I'm not too sure how many people will be walking around with a book title that has Grindr on the front of it, though maybe they will. There will be software and hardcover versions that I self-publish as well, but I think mostly digital. I also realized that I'll do the hard work myself of reaching out to niche bookstores, essentially all the queer bookstores. They're independent, so it's a lot easier, I think, to negotiate with them than it would be, let's say, a chain like Indigo's or Barnes & Noble. And also, I just, as mostly a journalist who's worked online, get how to hustle constantly to get your work out there. So I was really unsure how the traditional gatekeepers of publishing would view a book that was trying to be game theory based, game or a gay sex cruising app. I figured I'm going to try this on my own, and I had seen a lot of people do Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaigns. Works. I wanted to try that as well. I think because, first of all, it's good to get people to want to participate and be able to show a way to support a project ahead of time. It was a way for me to gauge interest in the project as well, which I think is very, very valuable. And I think that it's the idea of being able to build up to something that's really important. Like I wanted to see it grow, and it was really exciting for me to do that. And that money is now going towards things that I'm not very good at. I'm very good at words. I'm not very good at designing a cover.
Right.
I'm good at choosing a font for my stuff. I'm not very good at making the look inside the book. That's what it's going to. It's going to other people to do their jobs with it. And I'm curious to see how something that's self-published will do out there in the world. I don't have the power now of having a publisher behind me, but I also keep 70% of every book title that I sell.
Well, I think there's something to be said too for some books and some authors that if you, like for instance, I wrote a fan guide to True Blood under a pen name of Becca Wilcott, and that was published through a traditional publisher in ECW Press, but it was a publisher who was putting out a book knowing pretty much exactly who their key reader was going to be. That wasn't something that I would have been much help with. I was able to connect to the community, but in terms of actually knowing how to drop, hundreds or thousands of units in the right place, and essentially know that it would be a success, just because, unlike so many other kinds of publishing, so much is left up to the guesswork. Whereas I think in some cases, and I would argue this is a good case, I think you would be hindered by the traditional publishing model. And I mean, you're talking about a book that speaks to a very, wow, how am I going to say this? But a very progressive idea of sort of doing something that works in the moment. And and this would give you that kind of freedom to be able to even adapt your message and adapt how you're going to distribute your message in the moment in a way that will actually meet the needs of your reader. I think in a way that makes a lot of sense for self-publishing.
Well, I'm excited to definitely play around with this. I think also, I understand that, like in Canada, we see 5,000 books as a bestseller, right? Stakes are relatively low in terms of how this is going to sell. So I wanted to really play around with format and distribution models and to see how that works, because I think that, and here's where people can absolutely say that I'm wrong and that I don't know, enough about the industry, and I will gladly accept that if people tell me that. But I think what I did find interesting was that when I went through a self-publishing model, I didn't go through the grind the same way that you would have to through a traditional publisher. So maybe this book doesn't have the same cachet as someone who went through all those gatekeepers. And I'd like to see whether or not that is necessarily true. Whether or not consumers will tell the difference between something that's self-published or through a traditional publisher. Because I think that nowadays it's so important for the author and the writer to be able to go out there and promote their own work. Why I lean towards the self-publishing model. I don't know. Again, I have no real proof that it's just a sense that it's tougher to get a book, let's say, reviewed by some places if it's self-published,
right?
Because anyone can do that. But I think that then it unnecessarily restricts people that I have to somehow pay a chunk of what I would earn through a traditional publisher for them to be the gatekeeper that gives the gold seal that other media institutions can now view this as legitimate.
I mean, I think that that the biggest benefit, obviously, of a traditional publisher is that whether or not you believe in that curated model, it assists the media in the sense that they're not being presented with a couple of thousands of titles to consider for review. It's here's our fall list, and it could contain 4 titles. It might contain 70 titles. And then from there, it really is just about sort of how you go about pitching the individual media. But one thing that we know about books is that while we have these areas that are that are dwindling, but when it comes to actual sort of traditional books coverage, we all know that the place that you want your book to land is off the books page and in places where people are actually having conversations that are more based on hooks. And I think that when you've got a book, again, sort of like this, the hook, or the hooks rather, are so much more obvious that when it comes to the pitch, I mean, everything that you've said, to my mind, I can't wrap my head around why someone would say, well, now I'm not going to talk about it, even though it hits every single thing that I'm supposed to report upon, just because it was self-published. Fiction, on the other hand, is it's a much bigger risk, because you might be throwing 300 pages at someone and saying, would you please invest in my experience and enter into this world, and then interpret it, and then decide whether or not you think it's worthy of review. That's a much that's a much larger struggle. But I would say in your case, the hooks are rather obvious. So
I think as the two markets I'm kind of reaching are definitely users of Grindr and participants in queer culture. The tech side of things, I submitted a panel at South by Southwest because I really saw it as a use of locative services, and I tried to there are as many kind of angles for anyone to kind of pick it up, and it's a pop science book, so I think that hopefully it'll be interesting to a lot of people. But yeah, coming from a tech background, really wanted to see what it was like to self do as many of the aspects as I can, and maybe I'll learn at the end of this, like, what there were so many things that would have been so much easier to go through a traditional publisher, and maybe some other tricks which are like, wow, this might be a reason to go somewhere else. So that's insider baseball thing. Like, that's kind of like, that's my thinking behind what I want to do with this book as well. It's just about writing the book, but it's also seeing, with all these tools that are available to us, how do we reach our audience now more directly than we had a chance before, and does it make more financial sense? Like, as a writer, I know that my words in a journalism sense are worth less and less every single day. People are just paying less than they used to. So it's kind of vital to find other revenue streams to offset, to be able to do what I love to do.
Well, where can people learn about this book? Actually, did you actually say what the title is? Did we?
I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. It's Gaming Grindr: How One App Changed the Way we connect, and the Indiegogo was successful, which I was really excited about. I'll be able to have a very gorgeous cover, well designed, rather than the clumsy photoshopped thing that I would have made, which would have been terrible. It is. I am a third of the way done right now, and people can start pre-ordering it if they'd like off of GamingGrindr.com.
Okay.
It's a DRM-free ebook, which means that you can use it on any platform. I'm not a huge fan of trying to nail things down or make them restrictive. It'll also be available in softcover and hardcover, because I think that a physical artifact is really important too. And I can't wait to see how people respond to it based on the different ways that it's presented. Well,
I'm excited. Hopefully, maybe I'll get a sneak peek or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Jamie, this is...
Use all the techniques.
Really? Yes. With a name like Book Madam, yeah, I might have to change it up a little. Grindr Madam. Just a little. Jamie, this has been a pleasure. It's always fun chatting with you.
Yeah, I know. We can just do this for hours.
Okay, cool. Well, again. All right. See you, bye.